There are moments when we meet someone, from nowhere it seems, yet they bring with them the feeling that we've been waiting for them our whole life. There is no clear reason, no obvious sign, just a feeling that cannot be put into words, as if the deepest part of you has just been touched by someone. It isn't a fleeting emotion, but a quiet tremor from the unconscious, a place beyond logic, but instantly recognized by the soul. Carl Jung once said that we encounter ourselves again and again in 1,000 different forms along life's journey, and sometimes those forms enter our lives as people who seem like strangers, yet cause our hearts to tremble with an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Is that destiny? Or is it your true self speaking, recognizing a part of your soul that had long been forgotten? So, how can you know if someone is truly meant for you? And why does their presence make you confront yourself so deeply? Let's continue to explore these questions through the lens of Carl Jung, where psychology reaches the soul. Number 1. Synchronicity and meaningful encounters. Have you ever experienced a moment that seemed random, yet left you with an inexplicably profound feeling? A sudden meeting on a train, a fleeting glance you can't forget, or a chance encounter that feels like you've known the person for lifetimes? That's not a coincidence. Carl Gustav Jung called it synchronicity, events that occur in meaningful parallel, without any causal connection. Jung first introduced this concept in his seminal essay, Synchronicity and a Causal Connecting Principle, published in 1952. In it, he wrote, "Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see." In other words, synchronicity is always around us, for those awake enough to recognize it. According to Jung, some life events can't be explained by conventional logic, yet hold deep meaning for our soul. These moments are not random. They are messages from the unconscious, a resonance between the inner and outer worlds. Imagine you think of an old friend you haven't spoken to in years. That same afternoon, they message you. There's no clear cause, but what strikes you isn't the act itself, it's the feeling, as if the universe just sent you a signal. Or you walk into a new cafe, and a song from your childhood plays just as you're quietly struggling inside. Seen through ordinary eyes, these are coincidences. But for Jung, and for those who have felt it, these are links in an invisible web, where every experience is symbolic and intentional. In matters of the heart, synchronicity often shows up most clearly through fated meetings. You may have spent only a few minutes with someone, yet your heart trembles as if the entire universe whispered, "Yes, it's them." You can't explain why. There's no logical data to back it up, but with a certainty beyond words, that the meeting means something. Jung believed that in such moments, the personal and collective unconscious are working in tandem, sending you a message beyond language. One of Jung's most famous illustrations of synchronicity involved a female patient with mild psychosis, highly resistant to analysis. One day, she described a dream in which she was given a golden scarab. At that moment, Jung heard a light tapping at the window. He opened it, and a scarab beetle, nearly identical to the one in her dream, and highly unusual for that time and place, flew in. It was a moment that broke through her psychological defenses. As Jung wrote, it was the appropriate image of transformation, not logic, but the synchronistic experience opened an inner door. Synchronicity doesn't happen randomly. It happens when you are ready to receive its message, when you are attuned to your inner world, when you live truthfully, connected to your emotions, intuition, and inner truth. The outer world begins to reflect that. As Jung said, Till you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So, those fated encounters don't come from outside of you. They are reflections of what you've silently longed for, quietly summoned from within. Some relationships begin with what seems like a meaningless event. A passing glance on the street, an accidental touch, a wrongly sent message, yet the connection grows, deepens, and reaches places inside you that no one has touched before. You begin to change. You start facing parts of yourself you once avoided. That's when you realize the encounter wasn't random. That person didn't show up to fill a void, but to awaken something within you, a truer version of yourself, never before revealed. Jung never saw synchronicity as magic. For him, it was a profound spiritual principle, linking outer events to the inner psychological world. When we experience synchronicity, we are not merely observing life, we are waking up. As he wrote, synchronicity takes the coincidence of events in space and time as meaning something more than mere chance. That's why synchronicity becomes a guide on the journey of self-discovery, helping us recognize what logic alone cannot see. So if you've ever felt that someone appeared in your life at the right moment, bringing with them an unexplainable feeling, don't dismiss it. It may be a message from the unconscious. It may be a mirror reflecting the part of your soul you've been searching for. And perhaps, through that connection, you begin a journey, not to find someone else, but to finally find yourself. In a world that demands clear answers and hard evidence, Jung reminds us that not everything precious can be explained by logic. Sometimes, the heart understands before the mind can catch up. And it is in those synchronistic moments, when things unfold outside of any plan, yet with astonishing meaning, that we touch the most mysterious and sacred dimension of human life. Number 2. The one who is meant for you awakens the archetypes within you. When synchronicity leads you to an encounter that seems random but carries deep meaning, that is only the first doorway. Those who are truly meant for you do not just appear to give you a sense of connection. They don't simply match you on a rational or emotional level. They are catalysts for inner transformation. And that begins when they awaken the archetypes that have been sleeping in your unconscious. Carl Jung believed that beneath our consciousness lies the collective unconscious, a realm that holds archetypes, ancient spiritual patterns, roles and symbols shared by all humanity. Among them are 3 especially linked to inner growth through deep relationships: the anima, animus, the shadow, and the self. When you meet someone you feel deeply connected to in a way that transcends logic, they likely are the one awakening these archetypes within you. Love is not always gentle. Sometimes it comes like a storm, tearing apart the definitions of who you thought you were. Jung once wrote, "The meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. When 2 souls connect at a profound level, both are changed, and in that process, unconscious elements, hidden shadows, begin to rise to the surface." Let's begin with anima and animus, the archetypes representing the feminine aspect within a man, anima, and the masculine within a woman, animus. According to Jung, every person carries an unconscious image of the opposite sex, shaped by their experience with parents, society, and ancestral patterns. When you meet someone who stirs deep emotions in you, especially an inexplicable sense of attraction, it may be that you're projecting your anima or animus onto that person. For example, a man deeply in love with a woman may not only be loving her, but also loving the image of the inner woman she unconsciously reflects to him. That might symbolize gentleness, intuition, and deep emotion. qualities he has neglected in his conscious life. That relationship brings those hidden parts to life, forcing him to confront himself. On the other hand, a woman might feel irresistibly drawn to a man who is decisive, intelligent, powerful, someone who activates her animus, the inner energy of logic, action, and idealism that she has not yet integrated. These kinds of relationships awaken the very qualities each person needs to become whole. Jung emphasized, the anima and animus are two archetypes that form a pair, and it is through them that we meet and fall in love. Love, to him, is not just between two individuals. It is an interaction between inner images, between unconscious archetypes, seeking to merge with our conscious self. But anima and animus don't always appear in ideal form. Sometimes you're drawn to someone who causes pain, even obsession, and you can't explain why you can't walk away. These toxic loves might be signs that you're engaging with a distorted form of the archetype, forcing you to look inward and ask what's missing in you. Softness, initiative, the freedom to express. After anima, animus, the next step in this journey is the shadow. The one meant for you not only stirs your heart, but also frustrates you, triggers you, hurts you, and sometimes even scares you. Why? Because they touch your shadow, the parts of yourself you've rejected, hidden, or denied. This could be anger, weakness, desire, or the urge for control. When someone causes a strong reaction in you, don't just look at them. Ask what part of you they're activating. Jung wrote, to confront a person with their shadow is to show them their light. A person of destiny, in the Jungian sense, doesn't come to please you. They come to help you see yourself. And facing your shadow is not easy. It often brings crisis, conflict, and a sense of disorientation. But within that turmoil lies the greatest opportunity to grow, to reintegrate the divided parts of your soul. Finally, if you go deep enough, long enough, you reach the self, the symbol of wholeness, the union of conscious and unconscious, light and shadow. The one meant for you is not just a trigger for archetypal awakening. They are a mirror guiding you toward the inner totality of your being. When the connection is real, even if it passes through storms, it brings you to a new state, not of loving someone, but of returning to yourself. So don't assume that the one meant for you is someone who always makes you feel safe or at ease. They may arrive with challenges, emotional whirlwinds, moments where you question both yourself and them. But that is not a sign of something wrong. It is a sign that you are changing. And Jung stated it clearly. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. In short, meeting the one meant for you is not the destination of happiness, but the beginning of a deep spiritual journey. They don't complete you. They help you see the parts of you that have never been assembled. In their eyes, you see the forgotten fragments of yourself, and if you dare to walk the full path, you will not only understand them, you will, for the first time, fully understand yourself. Number 3. The darkness in love, facing what you've been avoiding. If the one meant for you is the person who awakens the archetypes within you, they are also the one who brings to light the parts you've rejected, the dark, forgotten, and sometimes shameful pieces of yourself. That's why true love, especially fated love, is not just a journey of sweetness and happiness. It's a direct collision with your shadow, with the very things you've been trying to avoid. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious aspect of the self that holds all the traits we reject: anger, jealousy, fear, shame, feelings of inadequacy, all the things we don't want to admit we have. In Aeon, Researches into the Phenomenology of the Self, he wrote, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, For no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. The shadow isn't just something frightening. It's something that demands transformation if you truly want to grow. When you meet someone who stirs your heart in ways you can't explain, and at the same time makes you feel deeply hurt, triggered, or intensely insecure, don't rush to blame them. It may be that their presence is activating an old wound inside you. It's not their fault. It's not necessarily a sign you should leave. It's an invitation to look at yourself, to see what you've buried beneath the mask of being fine. Take a real-world example. A woman who tends to be controlling and anxious in relationships, often triggered by her quiet, emotionally reserved boyfriend. She feels he doesn't love her enough or doesn't care. But if we look deeper, the emotions rising in her are not entirely caused by him. They stem from an unresolved childhood fear of abandonment. He becomes a mirror, reflecting her inner shadow, the small, insecure part of her that still needs healing. People often say love hurts, but no. Love shows you where you've already been hurt. In Psychological Aspects of the Persona, Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You don't grow by denying the shadow, you grow by facing it." And here's the paradox. The person who causes you the most pain may be the one who helps you understand yourself the most. Not because they're trying to hurt you, but because their presence reveals the wounds you've tried to hide. One of the clearest signs of the shadow is projection, when we assign to others the traits we don't want to admit in ourselves. If you despise someone for being arrogant, you're likely refusing to see that same arrogance in you. In love, this happens too. The person you love may be carrying the projection of your shadow. You see them as cold, when in truth you've denied your emotional detachment. You think they need you too much, when really you haven't acknowledged your deep desire to be loved that fully. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, Jung warned, "The shadow personifies everything that the subject refuses to acknowledge about himself. The danger is that if you don't see your shadow, it will still control you, but from the dark." That's why many relationships fall apart, not because the other person is wrong, but because we refuse to begin the journey inward. Facing the shadow isn't pleasant. It's like standing before a giant mirror where you can't help but see the raw truth about yourself. But the strange thing is, when you dare to do it, healing begins. The rage doesn't explode the same way. The anxiety softens, and you start seeing yourself and the other person with more humanity. One true story from Jungian therapy tells of a man who was often accused by his partner of being too cold and emotionally distant. Through therapy, he realized that he was overwhelmed by emotions because he had grown up in a family where expressing feelings was discouraged. When his wife complained, he didn't know how to respond, but her distress also revealed her wound, having been emotionally abandoned by her parents in childhood. They were projecting their shadows onto each other, and both were suffering. But once they saw it, healing didn't come from fixing each other. It came from understanding and embracing their shadows. Carl Jung emphasized, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. You can't become whole by eliminating your shadow. Only when you integrate it, when you love the ugly, the scary, the imperfect parts of yourself, can you truly love someone else. And when you meet the one who makes you face that shadow, know they didn't come to make you comfortable. They came to help you grow. True love is not a place to hide from your real self. It's a space where you are tested, reflected, confronted, and changed. If you're in a relationship that makes you feel both love and fear, deep connection and the urge to run, Don't label it toxic too quickly. Ask yourself, what am I learning about myself in this relationship? Because only when you dare to face the shadow does the light begin to appear. And in that very moment, when you stop running from yourself, when you stop loving just to fill a void, when you stop demanding the other person be perfect, you begin a different kind of love. Love no longer becomes a need. It becomes a journey of awakening, and that person, the one meant for you, is no longer your other half. They are your companion on the path to becoming whole. Number 4. The feeling of wholeness, being yourself. When the shadow has been confronted, when pain no longer makes you run, but becomes the material through which you understand yourself, what happens next is almost a natural unfolding. You begin to feel like you can simply be yourself. No more defenses, no more pressure to be worthy. And if the relationship remains, if it endures after both of you have passed through collisions, then in that place, in a gaze no longer clouded by fear, in a breath no longer hidden, you begin to enter what Carl Jung called the process of individuation. Jung defined individuation as the process of becoming the most complete version of oneself, or as he wrote in 2 essays on analytical psychology, individuation means becoming an individual, and, insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last, and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming one's self. When you go through a fated relationship, a connection born not from desire, but from the deep layers of the unconscious, what you are truly given is not romance, but a space to explore and express your authentic self without fear of being hurt or rejected. Picture this. In most relationships, we unconsciously wear a mask, a socially accepted role. You want to be loved, so you become easy to please. You fear losing someone, so you become agreeable. You don't want to be hurt, so you build walls. But in a true relationship, where soul recognizes soul, those masks start to fall away naturally. You no longer feel the need to be better to keep the other person. You no longer feel compelled to fake understanding. You are simply yourself, whole, honest, sometimes messy, and the other still looks at you with gentle eyes. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And a fated relationship, if it endures through challenge, becomes one of the most powerful levers for that privilege. Because when you are in love and don't have to trade away your authenticity, when you can express your vulnerability, your longing, your scars, and your strength, and still be received, you begin to understand that love isn't about striving for perfection, but about daring to be real. There's a recorded case from Jungian therapy involving a woman who, after a series of failed relationships, began connecting with a man entirely different from the type she'd typically been drawn to. No fireworks, no intensity. But strangely, in his presence, she felt no pressure to perform. She wasn't afraid to cry. She didn't feel ashamed to say, "I don't know what I want." And in that ordinary space, she realized she had spent years straining to be lovable, forgetting how light it feels to just be. That is the sign of individuation, when your true self is allowed to show up, unscripted and unplanned. In the relations between the ego and the unconscious, Jung described it this way: individuation is a process by which a person becomes a psychological individual, that is, a separate, indivisible unity or whole. This process doesn't happen in isolation. It can, and often does, get powerfully activated through a relationship. The other person is not your missing half, not there to complete you, but is a mirror, helping you see yourself more clearly, enter yourself more deeply, and move closer to becoming a whole being. Fated love does not remove challenges. It only changes how you face them. Instead of seeing conflict as a mistake, you begin to view it as an opportunity to understand yourself more deeply. You stop expecting the other person to understand you instantly. Instead, you learn to understand yourself first and to share that truth honestly. Over time, what forms between the two of you is not just a relationship, but an energy field that nourishes mutual growth. Someone once asked Carl Jung how to know if they were in the right relationship. He didn't give a direct answer, but he did write, "Wholeness for humans depends on the ability to own their own shadow, and their anima or animus, and their ego and their self." A right relationship doesn't come to fill your emptiness. It comes to reflect all that you are, including the parts that are still incomplete. And if, beside this person, you feel no need to hide anymore, if you can breathe, speak your truth, and sit in silence without guilt, then perhaps you've touched a kind of love that was always meant for you. The journey of individuation is not isolation. It is becoming your true self in a world where someone bears witness. And the one who is meant for you, if they come from the depths of the unconscious, won't try to change you or fix you. They will stand beside you as a mirror, a companion, a witness, showing you that you don't need to become anyone else to be worthy of love. We live in a time where everything is optimized, even love. We learn how to present better, be more attractive, and be less emotional. But Jung offers the opposite path. Become the truest version of yourself, even when it's messy, because that's where your vitality and depth live. And then, love that comes from the right place, where soul recognizes soul, won't just accept you. It will open for you. In the end, when you feel fully yourself in love, without defense, without performance, without fear of abandonment, that's not just a sign of real love. It's a sign you've entered the deepest stage of inner maturity. And as Carl Jung said, the goal of the individuation process is the synthesis of the self. Every time you are allowed to be yourself in a relationship, you are not just loving, you are stepping closer to the whole being you were born to become. Number 5. Loving the right person equals returning to yourself. When you move through the process of individuation within a relationship, when you learn to stop defending yourself and begin living in alignment with your authentic being, one profound truth becomes clear. Real love is not the place where you find happiness in another person, but the place where you are awakened to return to yourself. If individuation is the journey toward wholeness, then loving the right person is the deep contact that initiates that journey from within. It's not about searching for a missing half to complete you, but encountering someone who helps you realize you were never incomplete. You had simply forgotten who you are. Carl Jung once wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. And in true love, the other person doesn't lead you anywhere. They simply stand there, with their gaze and their presence, prompting you to look within." It's no coincidence that the deepest relationships often arise during the most difficult times. The person you truly need isn't the one who always makes you laugh, but the one who can make you cry, not because they hurt you, but because they help you access the parts of yourself you've locked away. These are old wounds, fears of abandonment, shame, feelings of unworthiness, and the longing to be seen that was never answered. The right person doesn't avoid those things. They bring them to the surface with sincerity, with their real presence. No games, no masks. There's a story often shared in Jungian therapy groups. A middle-aged man, after years of outward success, falls into personal crisis. Everything in his life seems fine, except for one thing. He doesn't feel alive. He says the woman he now loves is unlike any of the ideal types he used to chase. She's not especially striking. She doesn't overly cater to him. Yet every time they talk, he feels stripped bare. She shows me the part of myself I buried my whole life, the part that's afraid, that's small, that's never been faced. With her, he's no longer a businessman, an ideal father, or a successful man. He's just a human being trying to understand himself, and in her eyes, he sees not the image he worked so hard to build, but the raw, fragile, truest version of who he is. That is the power of a transformational relationship, where love isn't a reward, but a mirror reflecting your deepest essence. Jung wrote in The Psychology of the Transference, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. True love doesn't keep you in a comfort zone. It melts you down and recreates you at the same time. The common idea of love is full of expectations. The other person should make you happy, make you feel complete, make you feel loved, so you're never lonely again. But Jung warned that when we love to fill a void, we're unconsciously asking the other person to carry our unexamined unconscious. That isn't love, it's avoidance. In The Undiscovered Self, he wrote, loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. And in a transformational relationship, you are given the chance to share what matters most, not your story, but your being. The right person won't make you happy in the conventional sense. They'll make you awake. They won't try to fix you or take responsibility for making you whole. They may not understand you completely or always agree with you, but they will do one thing that matters. They'll stay, even when you are not your most lovable version. In their presence, you will dare to do the thing you've always feared, to live honestly, to open your heart, to put down the mask. One woman once shared that the relationship that changed her most wasn't with someone who pampered her. It was with someone who made her cry during their first argument. Not because he hurt her, but because it was the first time someone listened to her vulnerability without judgment, without leaving. I spent my youth trying to be strong, she said, and I didn't realize how exhausted I'd become. It wasn't a romantic love like in the movies, but it was real. And it transformed her. Transformation doesn't always mean happiness. It means awakening, growing, and accepting truths you once avoided. And sometimes, the love that transforms you the most is the one that hurts you the most, not because it's toxic, but because it forces you to face yourself. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." The person who helps you realize that, through conflict, through reflection, through emotional collision, is someone you should thank because they've brought you closer to your real self. So, loving the right person is not the same as finding the ideal partner. It's meeting someone who makes it impossible for you to keep living inauthentically. They don't come to hand you happiness as a gift. They come to tell you, it's time to return to yourself. And if you're ready to welcome them, not as salvation, but as a fellow traveler on your path to self-discovery, what you receive is not a perfect relationship. What you receive is the truth. And from that truth, healing begins, not through anyone else, but through you. When Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely," he wasn't just describing a personal journey. He was describing the very essence of true love. Loving the right person is not ultimately about finding someone to help you build a perfect life. It's about meeting someone who makes it impossible for you to keep living inauthentically. Someone whose very presence doesn't just make you feel attractive or safe, but makes you feel called home. Home to yourself. There's no logical explanation strong enough to justify why someone makes your heart echo the way they do. But you can't analyze it, but you feel it, with a vague but undeniable certainty. It is a deep resonance between two souls, not taking place on the level of conscious thought, but from the depths of the unconscious. That person isn't the perfect missing piece that completes you. They are the sacred companion who holds up a mirror so you can see yourself clearly, honestly, more fully than ever before. Fated love does not promise a smooth path. It challenges you, pushes you beyond your comfort zone, and exposes the parts of yourself you've tried to hide. But precisely because of that, it can become a profound spiritual journey where you don't just love the other person, but gradually become your truest self. So, if at any point in your life you've felt a connection that transcended ordinary understanding, if you've met someone who made you question, unravel, search, break, and be reborn, believe in that. Not everyone is your destiny. But when destiny truly arrives, you won't need to ask. You'll know. Not with your mind, but with your soul. And Jung would smile if you understood this. The greatest love is not the one you find in someone else. It's the love that leads you back to yourself and teaches you to accept all that you are. If you've experienced a relationship like that, one that didn't just move you, but awakened you, share it in the comments below. What did you learn about yourself through that love? And do you believe in destiny? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next journeys into the soul, guided by the insights of Carl Jung. Have you ever met a stranger and felt you've known them forever? No explanation needed, no clear signs, but you just know that their presence isn't a coincidence, that they're in your life for a reason deeper than logic can grasp. Not everyone stops to ask, is this person meant for me? But if you've ever asked that, maybe you've touched a deeper layer of experience where the unconscious begins to speak to you. Carl Jung didn't believe in random encounters. He believed that every person who enters our life is a reflection of our inner world, trying to be seen. The people we're drawn to, the ones we can't ignore, they mirror parts of ourselves we haven't fully understood. Maybe they come to help you awaken, or to shine a light on an old wound, or to stir a part of you that's been forgotten. When someone is truly meant for you, you'll know, but not with your mind, with a feeling deep inside, where the unconscious and intuition speak together. So, how do you know if someone is truly right for you, and not just another cycle of pain repeating itself? The answer lies in your unconscious, and Jung has been pointing the way for a long time. 1. Synchronicity, when the inner world aligns with the outer. There are moments when someone enters your life as if it had been planned all along. No invitation, no clear reason, yet something about it feels undeniably right. That feeling doesn't come from analysis, but from a deep inner knowing. Carl Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence, occurring when an external event precisely mirrors your internal state. Jung didn't believe that the significant events in our lives happen by chance. To him, synchronicity is the way the personal and collective unconscious communicate with consciousness through outward events. Encounters that feel destined, people who make you know they're here for a reason, these aren't random. They're expressions of a spiritual flow, where your inner world and the outer one merge in perfect harmony. In a well-known passage, Jung wrote, "Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see, and for that to happen, something within must shift. Because, as Jung once said, the world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you." In other words, if you don't understand what you're putting out into the world, you won't recognize what you're drawing in. Synchronicity isn't magic. It's a sign that you and the world are moving in the same rhythm, that what's happening around you is the clearest reflection of what's going on inside. And once you begin to awaken, you'll see those so-called coincidences through an entirely different lens. Second, relationships are mirrors of the inner self. If synchronicity is how the world communicates with you, then relationships are the clearest place where the unconscious reveals itself. Every person you meet, every relationship you're part of, from romance to family, from work to friendship, reflects a part of you that you haven't fully brought into awareness. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Many people ask themselves, why do I keep meeting the same type of person, ending up in relationships that hurt, make me feel not enough, or force me to earn love? The answer isn't in the other person. It's within you. These patterns aren't curses. They're messages. The unconscious is using others to mirror back the beliefs, fears, and wounds you haven't faced yet. If you're often drawn to people who make you doubt your worth, that's no coincidence. It's the mirror effect, a principle Jung called projection. When you haven't acknowledged the rejected parts of yourself, you project them onto others and then suffer because you think they are the problem. In relationships, what you feel isn't always about the other person. It's the mirror reflecting the parts of you that remain unintegrated, a fear of abandonment from childhood, a belief that you're unworthy, or an inner script that says love must come with pain. So instead of asking, why are they like that? Jung would invite you to ask, why am I drawn to this? What in me needs to be seen through this person? Awakening begins when you realize that every relationship doesn't come to complete you, but to help you see what you're missing in yourself. Third, signs of a genuine connection. In a world obsessed with drama, where fiery love affairs and intense passion are often praised as the standard for true love, it's easy to confuse emotional intensity with depth of connection. But in reality, a genuine connection is rarely loud. It rarely comes with overwhelming feelings or the sense of being caught in a storm. Instead, it brings peace, clarity, and a quiet sense of rightness that doesn't need explaining. You don't feel the need to impress. You don't have to choose your words carefully, control your behavior, or do anything just to get it right. You don't feel like you have to try hard to keep someone, because they're not here to be kept. They're here to walk with you. Carl Jung didn't speak much about love the way pop culture defines it, but he spoke clearly about relationships that foster inner growth. A genuine connection, in Jung's view, is a space where you don't have to shrink yourself to fit in. It's not about becoming a better version of yourself, but about being allowed to be who you already are. No act, no role-playing, no pressure to be good enough. The other person doesn't make you feel like you need to edit your essence. On the contrary, they receive you as you are, and their presence doesn't require you to sacrifice your core values. That ease of being yourself is one of the clearest signs of a healthy relationship. Jung said we cannot build true relationships while still wearing masks. In reality, most fragile relationships fall apart because people haven't yet been real with themselves, which leads to being drawn to distorted reflections of an incomplete self. But when you begin the process of individuation, when you start connecting deeply with who you are, the relationships you attract change too. No more battles for attention, no more needing to prove your worth, no more fear that showing your vulnerable side will drive someone away. They don't idealize you, but they see you, truly see you, and their acceptance doesn't need to be spoken out loud. This is what makes a genuine connection completely different from those that feel like a high but drain you. In a healthy relationship, your inner world feels more stable, not more chaotic, not because there are no conflicts, but because conflict doesn't turn into war. Every disagreement becomes a chance to understand each other, instead of a reason to retreat or hurt one another through silence, anger, or manipulation. Each person keeps their individuality, yet they coexist in a safe space where differences aren't threats, they're chances to grow. That feeling of being yourself in a relationship is not something to take lightly. It's a subtle yet powerful sign that you're in a connection that doesn't require you to sacrifice your essence just to be loved. And that, in the end, only happens when you've built a healthy relationship with yourself. Jung believed that we can only attract what matches the level of consciousness we're living from. You can't recognize the truth if you haven't been truthful with yourself. You can't connect deeply if you're still avoiding the parts of you that haven't healed. So the right person doesn't show up to complete you. They reflect the depth of connection you've already made with your inner world. If you find that being with someone doesn't make you perform, doesn't make you fight to be loved, doesn't make you feel like you're in a constant battle for attention, that's a clear sign. When their presence doesn't trigger your fear of loss, but instead awakens calm, openness, and the inspiration to live more honestly, then you don't need to question it, because the truth doesn't need to be explained. It just needs to be felt. Fourth, the individuation process and the power of inner truth. Carl Jung believed that the deepest purpose of human life isn't to be successful, loved, or accepted, but to return to the truth of one's unique self. He called this the process of individuation, a profound psychological journey where one gradually sheds the masks, societal expectations, and roles shaped since childhood to step into inner truth. And the fascinating thing is, the closer you get to your authentic self, the more the right people begin to appear, naturally. This isn't magic. It's not the universe sending the right person as a surprise gift. It's the natural result of your inner and outer worlds coming into alignment, of reaching the maturity to distinguish between the pull of the familiar and the call of what's right. When you begin living truthfully, you're no longer drawn to old patterns of relationships built on wounds, control, or fear. You stop trying to heal someone just to feel valuable. And most importantly, you stop staying in relationships that make you lose yourself just because you're afraid of being alone. On the path of individuation, you start to see more clearly the patterns that have repeated in your life, the types of people, emotions, and conflicts you once believed were fate. But Jung warned, fate isn't something you're doomed to live out. It's what you keep repeating when you're unaware. When you wake up, you stop calling those cycles destiny You see them as signs that something in you is asking to be seen, acknowledged, and released. Individuation isn't a destination. It's a continuous journey. And on that journey, you will change. You'll stop wanting what you once longed for. You'll realize that some of the people you loved deeply were only filling an emptiness inside you, not truly resonating with your essence. You'll begin to walk away, not because they were wrong, but because you've changed. And that is a powerful step toward growth. Having the courage to let go of what no longer fits, even if it once meant everything. Along this path, your magnetism shifts. It no longer comes from trying to be better, more attractive, or more worthy. Your energy now comes from clarity within. You don't need anyone to validate your worth. You don't need someone to fill the gaps. You don't need someone to choose you, because you've already chosen yourself. And that quiet, inner certainty is exactly what draws the right people to you. One of the clearest signs that you're on the right path in your individuation journey is that you stop trying to attract anyone. You simply live your truth, and that alone creates resonance. People who no longer match your energy will gently fall away. Those who align with your level of awareness will appear naturally, without force, without the need to hold on, because what's right stays on its own. True attraction doesn't lie in appearance, achievements, or perfection. It lies in being anchored within yourself. Jung understood this deeply. For him, real love could only emerge when two individuals had each walked far enough on the path of self-discovery. And when they meet, they don't come to complete each other. They come to continue becoming themselves, this time together. 5 mismatched relationships and the lessons they bring. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay. Not everyone who stirs your heart is someone you should hold on to. And not everything that feels like love is necessarily healthy. Some relationships make you feel small, hurt, constantly trying, and constantly afraid of loss. But that doesn't mean you met the wrong person. Jung wouldn't use the word wrong. He would say you've met a reflection of your own fears, wounds, and limiting beliefs. Many people stay stuck in relationships that drain them, yet they can't walk away. They explain it as love. But love never requires you to abandon yourself to be held. Relationships that make you prove your worth, compete for attention, or constantly feel not enough are signs that there's a part of you still in need of healing. It could be a hidden belief that love must be earned through sacrifice, a childhood memory that affection must be deserved, an old wound playing out through a new person with the same script, being abandoned, dismissed, or devalued. Jung once said that what we do not make conscious will control our lives, and we will call it fate. This is especially true in relationships. If you keep repeating the same patterns, superficial connections, unrequited love, and intense but exhausting romances, the issue may not lie in the other person, but in the unconscious patterns you're living out. In psychoanalysis, this is called the repetition compulsion, the automatic pull to recreate familiar emotional dynamics, even when they hurt. Because what's familiar feels safe. The paradox is that we often choose what hurts us, as long as it feels familiar. That's why Jung didn't advise running from mismatched relationships. On the contrary, he saw great value in them, if you dare to look at the message beneath them. Instead of asking, "Why did that person hurt me?" Jung would invite you to ask, "Why did I allow it to continue? What am I trying to heal inside myself through this person?" And the most important question of all, did I choose them out of self-love or fear of being alone. This is where the line becomes clear between a choice made from love and one made from lack. When you love yourself, you don't allow anyone to violate your worth. You know your boundaries and what's non-negotiable. But if you're afraid of being alone, you're more likely to trade those boundaries for the comfort of staying. You might call endurance sacrifice. You might mistake instability for destiny. And that's the greatest lesson mismatched relationships can offer. They test how deeply you're connected to yourself. The other person isn't necessarily bad, but if you stay even when you feel yourself shrinking, draining, and self-betraying, it's not them you need to blame. You need to be honest with yourself. Jung didn't dismiss the role of misguided relationships. On the contrary, he saw them as critical turning points in the individuation process. It's often when you hit bottom in a toxic connection that you finally see what part of you led you there. And if you choose to rise, not to assign blame, but to understand yourself, then the pain becomes a catalyst for awakening. Of course, that doesn't mean you have to stay just to keep learning the same painful lesson. No one needs to suffer more to be worthy. But every time you choose to release a relationship that no longer fits, instead of repeating an old pattern, you open up space for real connections to appear. Remember, none of us is truly ready for the right person while we're still stuck in the wrong relationship. Sometimes, the most loving act you can offer yourself is to walk away from something that once felt deep and familiar, but no longer feels true. Sixth, true love is not an emotional high. In a world where film, music, and pop culture constantly glorify fiery romances full of ups and downs and high drama, it's easy to be conditioned to believe that the more intense and chaotic love is, the deeper it must be. Explosive arguments, jealous rage, the emotional rush of reunion after separation, all of it gets packaged and sold as passion. But Carl Jung, with his deep insight into the human psyche, would tell you something very different. Real love is not an emotional fever. It is a state of deep awareness and harmony, quiet but steady. Jung understood that what we often label as intensity is in many cases just two shadows colliding, two wounds, two insecurities, two unconscious parts that haven't been resolved. In that collision, feelings erupt powerfully, but without real roots. And because there's no true foundation, the relationship can easily spiral into cycles of expectation, disappointment, and repeated pain. A healthy connection, by contrast, doesn't make you feel breathless. It doesn't create a sense of addiction to the other person. It doesn't force you to overthink every word or action. In true love, you can exhale and simply be yourself. No fear, no strain, no need to constantly adjust yourself just to maintain a good image in their eyes. Real connection isn't marked by dramatic highs, but by deeply quiet moments. Being with that person, you feel at peace, not because everything is perfect, but because no part of you has to tense up to be loved. You feel free, not because you've stopped caring, but because you're secure in knowing that this love isn't built on control, insecurity, or mind games. And most of all, you feel fully yourself, whole and without conditions. Many people have believed that if a relationship doesn't bring intense emotion, it must be lacking spark. But the truth is that illness does not mean coldness. In a mature connection, stillness is the space where two people walk together without needing to constantly generate emotional plot twists. It's where you can sit in silence and still feel deeply connected. Jung would say that true harmony doesn't come from perfect compatibility, but from the conscious willingness to witness and respect your differences. When both people are living in truth with themselves, they don't use the relationship to fill a void, to escape themselves, or to soothe an untouched loneliness. They're together because they want to be, not because they need to be. And that's what sets a real connection apart from emotional addiction. In emotional addiction, you lose yourself. In true love, you return to yourself. The right kind of love doesn't make you rise and crash. It opens you, gently, deeply, and more with each day. Not fast, not frantic, but steady. Steady, because it's built on inner honesty, self-awareness, and respect, not only for the other person, but also for your being. If a relationship makes you feel like you have to chase, if love starts to feel like endurance to prove yourself, if chaos becomes a requirement, stop and ask yourself a simple question. Is this love, or is this a wound trying to be loved again? Because true love, as Jung saw it, doesn't awaken in you the need to fight for it. It awakens your presence, and that presence, quiet as breath, clear as light, and deep enough for you to know, tells you, I don't need to change to be loved. I just need to be myself. Seventh, intuition, the voice of the unconscious. There are things you know without being able to explain them. A nameless feeling, a vague calling from within, a quiet certainty that rises when you meet someone, not loud, not logical, but undeniable. That's intuition, not a vague hunch, but a deep form of knowing that comes from the unconscious, the place that stores all your life experiences, even the ones you've never named. Carl Jung saw intuition as one of the 4 fundamental psychological functions, but it was unique among them. It doesn't require evidence or proof, only attention. Intuition is a tool for spiritual direction, the voice of your deeper self, where the unconscious communicates with consciousness, not through words, but through feeling. Picture this. You're talking to someone for the first time, and after just a few minutes, you feel an inexplicable closeness. Not because they said anything remarkable, not because they match your type, but because their presence makes you feel safe. No defenses, no anxiety, no fear of being hurt if you reveal yourself. And even if you can't name what it is, something about them puts you at ease. That's your intuition speaking. On the other hand, you might find yourself in a relationship that looks perfect on paper. They check all the boxes: stable job, good communication, kind, even thoughtful. But something doesn't click. There's a quiet discomfort you can't explain. Every silence feels uneasy. Every honest moment feels overthought. You try to stay because your logic says, someone like this is worth holding on to. But deep down, something won't rest. That's also your intuition, this time being ignored. Jung once said, intuition gives outlook and insight. It revels in the garden of magical possibilities as if they were real. Intuition doesn't sound alarms. It doesn't scream. It shows up as a soft wave, just enough to make you feel, something here needs my attention. But many people have learned to distrust that feeling because we've been taught to be logical, to be realistic, and to only believe what can be explained. And so they stay in relationships where, from the very beginning, intuition whispered, this isn't it. But reason insisted, just give it a try. A woman once shared her story. In a relationship that lasted 3 years, she never felt fully at peace. Nothing was obviously wrong. The man was respectful, responsible, not violent, and not unfaithful, but she couldn't be herself. Every time she tried to speak her truth, she pulled back, afraid of upsetting him. Every time she felt sad, she forced a smile. She didn't trust the feeling of disconnection inside. because everything looked fine. Only when she stepped back, lived more quietly, and tuned into herself, did she realize that her intuition had been speaking all along. She just hadn't dared to listen. Jung believed that for intuition to play its proper role, you need something simple, yet rare in today's world: inner silence. When you're no longer drowned out by noise, expectations, anxiety, fear, and assumptions, you can hear your intuition. It's not an aha moment. It's a quiet current but consistent, and the more honest you are with your feelings, the more you'll hear it. How many times have you felt something's off but stayed anyway? How many times has your intuition said, "This person isn't for me," but your mind produced a convincing list to argue otherwise? How often have you chosen hope over your gut? Jung wouldn't blame you, but he would remind you, your intuition isn't wrong. You just haven't been quiet enough to hear it. When the right person shows up, you won't need to check if they match your ideal type. You won't need to measure compatibility. You won't overthink. You'll simply feel right. A natural ease. A soft flow between you. A sense that you don't need to perform, read their mind, or hold the connection together with effort. True connection always comes with deep clarity, not from your head, but from the center of your chest. Sometimes, you won't have a reason for why you trust someone, why you feel safe around them, or why you don't feel the need to be guarded. And you won't need one, because not everything true needs to be explained. Some things are only meant to be felt, and that is the language of intuition. So if you find yourself torn between doubt and a feeling you can't name, give yourself space to listen, not through thinking, but through presence. The answer, as Jung suggested, doesn't come from overanalysis, but from whether you're willing to trust the quiet wisdom already inside you. 8. Become the right person for yourself first. In the search for the right person, there's a question most people rarely stop to ask themselves: have I become the right person for myself yet? We often look outward, waiting for someone to come into our lives and fill the gaps, to prove that we are worthy of love. But as Carl Jung emphasized, the external world is merely a mirror of your inner world. If you're still living from a sense of lack, unworthiness, or constantly shrinking yourself to fit someone else's mold, you'll only attract relationships that reinforce those beliefs. Becoming the right person for yourself isn't a slogan. It's a real process of transformation, a journey inward, where you learn to face yourself honestly, without avoidance or pretense. It starts by observing your emotions and reactions without judgment. When you feel jealous, anxious, or vulnerable in a relationship, instead of suppressing or blaming yourself, pause and ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me? Where does it come from? What part of me needs to be seen and acknowledged? Not resisting your emotions is the first step toward healing. When you stop turning away from yourself, you begin to build the inner safety you've been seeking in others. One of the deeper layers to confront is what Jung called the shadow, the parts of yourself you've rejected or that were never accepted, the fear of abandonment, unspoken wounds, the belief that love must be earned or bargained for, not received freely. These repressed parts unconsciously shape your behavior, leading you to repeatedly choose the wrong people, not because they are bad, but because they match your wounds. If you've ever believed your worth depends on pleasing others, you'll attract those who expect exactly that. Not because you're unlucky, but because you haven't yet awakened enough to reject what no longer serves you. So, how do you truly become the right person for yourself? First, Develop a non-judgmental awareness of your inner world. Be honest with questions like, where do I usually feel unsafe in relationships? What am I most afraid of when entering a new connection? Am I staying out of love or fear of being alone? These aren't comfortable questions, but if you dare to listen, the answers become powerful guides to rewrite how you love and how you allow yourself to be loved. Once you begin to recognize and integrate the shadow, the next essential step is to redefine your standards for love. Pause and write down what is non-negotiable for you in a relationship. Don't write what society expects. Write what you need to be fully yourself. For example, I need space where I don't have to shrink to be loved. I won't choose someone because they need me, but because I truly want to be present in their life. Or simply, I'm done bending to hold on to love. These small declarations are, in fact, big declarations of self-respect. Becoming the right person for yourself also means building a steady habit of inner connection. This doesn't come from books or expensive therapy sessions. It comes from small daily acts. Each morning, take 5 minutes to ask yourself, what am I truly feeling today? Each night, place your hand on your heart and ask, what did I betray in myself today to gain someone's approval? Honesty doesn't have to be loud, but it needs to be consistent. From there, you begin to rebuild the most foundational relationship of all, the one between you and yourself. When you live truthfully with yourself, people who no longer align will naturally fade away, not because they're wrong, but because your inner frequency has changed. And when you no longer seek love to fill a void, but to share from wholeness, you'll start attracting people on a similar path. They won't come to complete you, but to grow alongside you, consciously and freely. The truth is, none of us can truly recognize the right person if we're still living out of alignment with who we are. You won't recognize someone else's light if you haven't yet stepped out of your own shadow. Jung once said, don't waste time looking for something outside that you're not yet ready to find within. So before you ask whether someone is meant for you, ask yourself, have I truly chosen myself yet? In the end, everything you're searching for in a relationship, safety, understanding, the feeling of being seen, of being chosen unconditionally, begins in one place, your relationship with yourself. Carl Jung never promised that living authentically would instantly lead you to the right person, but he believed that when your inner and outer worlds begin to align, when the life you live matches who you truly are, you'll start to recognize who genuinely belongs on your path, not through promises, not through first impressions, but through a deep, unmistakable feeling. This is someone I don't need to try to be loved by. The truth is, you can't recognize the right person if you haven't first learned how to live truthfully with yourself. You can't tell the difference between love and dependency if you've never nourished yourself with self-respect. You can't hear your intuition if your inner world is still loud with unhealed wounds. So the journey of finding someone for you is, in truth, the journey back to your real self, so that when that person does appear, you'll recognize them, not with your mind, but with the quiet peace of knowing, one that needs no explanation, no striving, no performance, no grasping. Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. When you live in alignment with your essence, what isn't real will fall away. Those who are drawn to you from fear will drift, and what truly belongs to you will remain. This journey isn't easy. It asks you to release many things. The image of yourself you've worked so hard to maintain, relationships you thought were essential, and even the expectation that someone will come and make you happy. But when you choose to turn inward, to sit with yourself, to choose honesty over convenience, you begin to see one thing clearly. When you become the right person for yourself, the right person for you doesn't need to be chased. They will recognize you, just as you recognize them. And when that moment arrives, there will be no more doubt. No proof is needed. No logic is required. Only presence. And you will know with a quiet, profound certainty that words cannot explain. If any of this spoke to you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever known someone was meant for you without being able to explain why? Or are you on the journey of becoming the right person for yourself?